So I saw Jeff Bezos' interview with CNBC, and I have some thoughts. The comment he made that I want to respond to is he said not to villainize billionaires and instead focus on solutions. So, in the interest of doing that, let's discuss. The framework he put forward is 5 whys. And that's something that I've done as a software engineer in the past, where you ask, why is this happening? And you generate an answer. And then to understand, kind of work your way back the causal chain of understanding how things interact and what causes what, and putting all the pieces together. You keep asking why, 5 times. And in the world we live in, where everything is sort of all these cause and effect interactions, you're never going to get to the bottom of it, because everything is caused by events leading up to it. But if you ask why 5 times, you're usually able to get to at least a point where you can intervene and take some sort of corrective action. So what he was discussing was wealth inequality. So the simple answer is, why is there wealth inequality? Is because the rich people have a lot of money and the poor people don't have very much. So why? Because for the past couple decades, we've lived in a world where wages, the income that people earn to do work, has not kept pace with asset prices. The costs of owning a home, or the costs of, or the price of stocks on the stock market. Earning wages for, or income, salary, for working has been consistently over time devalued compared to just owning things. Why is that? Well, because the people who own things are able to make decisions with respect to the things they own. If they own a company, they get to vote. If they own a newspaper, they get to participate in hiring decisions and editorial decisions as to what sorts of information that newspaper puts out. If they own a tech company, they get to influence how the algorithm prioritizes certain things and deprioritizes others. So people who own assets have wielded more power to shape the world we live in than the people who earn wages or salary. And so the world they've shaped is one in which ownership is increasingly valued more than work. So that's just 3 whys. And we've already gotten to a point that more or less disproves what Jeff Bezos was saying about billionaires not being the villains. Now, I'm not a strict moralist in any sort of religious sense. I believe in cause and effect. And I actually agree with Jeff Bezos that we should look for solutions rather than litigate problems. Now, there are a lot of problems that could be litigated. And if that's what we're going to end up doing, that's what we're going to end up doing. But in the interest of focusing on solutions, I think that the only sense in which a reasonable argument can be made that Jeff Bezos is right, that increasing the taxes on his wealth won't at least contribute to solving the problem, is the sense in which, when he said, doubling my taxes won't do anything for a nurse in Queens, he's probably right. We probably need to do a lot more than double them. So this is my invitation to Jeff Bezos and all the other billionaires to participate in solving the fucking problem, or we'll litigate who's causing it. All right, so I stopped recording earlier, so there might be a weird cut here. I'll figure out how to edit this together, but there's more whys. We talked a bit how Jeff Bezos wanted solutions, not litigating who's the villain, who's the victim. Fair enough. Let's keep solutioning, keep asking why. There's more we can unpack here. So, why can't a nurse in Queens afford food and rent? We discussed how there's been a steady erosion of wages and salaries with respect to asset prices. Groceries and rent are not necessarily directly correlated with asset prices, but indirectly they certainly are. the grocery stores have to keep making a profit to keep justifying higher and higher asset prices. And all of their upstream suppliers have to do the same. So that translates to grocery inflation, which we all know how bad inflation has been. And the core driver of inflation is asset inflation, which is much, much higher than CPI inflation or consumer price index inflation, which tracks things like rent and groceries. But that's getting a little bit technical. We'll try to keep this more practical, I guess. Anyway, so coming back to the whys. Now, inflation, I mentioned that there's sort of broad asset price inflation. There's CPI, consumer price index inflation. Inflation just refers to the rate at which things get more expensive, or the process of things getting more expensive, if you will. And there's a lot of different stuff you can buy. You can buy shirts, cars, houses, stocks, and things get more expensive at different rates. So it's not like there's a flat, I mean, we do kind of average it, and there are various ways that you can talk about the sort of flat rate of inflation. CPI is one I mentioned. That's a common one economists use. But broadly speaking, different things get more expensive at different rates. And so what happens when asset prices inflate faster than wages and salaries is it creates what economists call a K-shaped economy, where, as Donald Trump and all the billionaires love to say, look how great the economy is doing. GDP is going up, which most of us don't give a shit about because most of us don't own assets. But what happens when assets get more expensive is it creates this class of people who can afford to buy things, not rent and groceries, but like yachts and designer purses, or I don't know what the rich people buy. It's generally stupid shit. But anyway, it creates a class of goods that are only affordable for the rich. And as the rich get richer and become the super rich, then there's more goods created to appeal to the super rich. And if I build a yacht that I can sell for, I don't know, tens of millions or 100 millions, I don't know what a yacht costs these days. But it certainly costs a lot more than groceries. So what that does is it skews the incentives. If I am someone who has money and wants to invest that money in bettering society, if you will, but I also want to make a profit, maybe I don't even care about bettering society, maybe I just want to make a profit. Am I going to invest my money in farming and producing food that will create a surplus of food, which by supply and demand will reduce the cost of groceries? Or am I going to invest in building super yachts and make hundreds of millions selling super yachts to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all of their psychopathic buddies? Obviously, I'm going to invest in building yachts. So as this K-shaped economy, as the rich economy goes up, and as the poor economy goes down, it shifts the incentives for the rich people away from investing in things that benefit us, broadly speaking, the poor people, or even the middle class at this point, let's be honest. And it shifts towards essentially creating a rich class of asset owners that owns everything and controls everything, and a poor class of wage salary earners who are increasingly not even producing the things that benefit them and reduce prices and livability and improve society for them. They just become essentially an indebted slave class catering to the whims of these billionaires. So if we want to fix it, like I said, the most straightforward way to fix it is to even the playing field, to reduce the price of assets, to reduce the wealth of the wealthy. And one way that has been proposed to do that, and the most straightforward, systemic, solution-oriented way to do that, is a wealth tax. But I have another proposal. Because, let's be honest, our policymakers and politicians are largely bought off by the wealthy at this point, if they're not wealthy themselves due to insider trading or backroom deals or however else they manage to cheat at the game of life. So, in the interest of being business-minded, I've proposed this idea before, but I'm going to propose it again. The anarcho-communist capitalist organization for revolutionary democracy. This would be a business that would prioritize on producing the things that people actually need: food, housing, energy. If you give me money, if you give us money, I will not pay myself excessive wages. I will hire as many people as I can to create as much actual good for the world as possible, not just data centers to surveil the poor people as the billionaires enrich themselves. So that's my proposed fix. I mean, primarily my proposed fix is wealth taxes, but I'm not a politician. I can't just snap my fingers and change policy overnight. But what I can do is tell you what I would do if given the kind of assets that I had that you have. So speaking to the billionaires. If you're not a billionaire listening to this, then you're in the same boat as I am. Fuck the billionaires. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. I've set a deadline for myself to, make my life better. We all want to make our lives better. But we also don't want to be held hostage by the billionaires and the politicians who work for them. So I'm trying to thread the needle there. Anyway, I've set a deadline for myself for 1 week. I'm proposing a solution-oriented fix, not villainizing or blaming anyone. I'm describing the problem and proposing a solution. So if you want to work with me, work with me. Otherwise, we can litigate what the problems are and who the villains and who the victims are. I'm happy to do that if that's what you prefer. Thanks for listening.